Hi, my name's Dave. This is my first time attempting to help people with a basic workflow or my basic workflow in Darktable, open source photography software. Personally, I think it's brilliant, but it's big, it's complex, and you might need some help working your way through. So, here goes. When you open it, you are presented with the light table view. I've already imported some stuff that I took at an Audubon property nearby. None of it's great. I was just out for a walk, had the camera with me. So let me briefly show you what I do here. You can see when you open it minimized, you can hit the F11 key. It'll maximize it, and you get true full screen, which is how I love to work with it. If I had not imported something, I would start here with the folder under the import tab. Click on folder, and I'd go through my file directory. I've already, you can see, imported it, so I'd go to Audubon Broadmoor -raw. That's a whole other video. Click on it, and down here, or actually a lot of times it comes in, oh no, that was right, it comes in here. I would hit open, and it's going to import everything that I took. And again, please don't judge me on my photographs. I wasn't out to photograph, I was out just for a walk. Anyhow, so here we are in Light Table. The first thing I will do, let me turn off anything that I've already got going on here. Up here you can see I've got sort by color label. Change that to sort by time. And it'll reorder everything. So these were the first pictures I shot. These were the last pictures that I shot. Down here, you got a couple of different ways of using the file manager. I like it as file manager as it is here. Scrolling down moves through it, up and down, moves you through all the pictures you took. If you hold down Control and hover over one and you zoom, it becomes a zoom. You scroll up and you zoom in on that particular picture. Same thing, you can scroll out to see more, and you'll see here there's 5 across. I can also slide this, show you how many there are across. There is also a zoomable light table. This is some old school type of photography. There it is. This is basically your negatives laid out on a light table. You scroll in, grab them and move around to look at them. Scroll out, again using the control and the mouse wheel. I used to use that. I ended up preferring, where'd it go? File manager. It's easier to scroll in and select. Alright, so in my workflow, the first thing I'll do is hit the tab button. I get full screen, which I like. You can use Control and Z. And these little red boxes are going to show you the area of highest contrast, or basically what it thinks you were focused on. You can see here I was at F8, 16 millimeters. F8 on 60 millimeters is going to be a big depth of field, and a lot of stuff, as you can see, will be in focus. But what I'm looking at is my stars here and the X. So the first thing I'll do, I have it set up in the options somewhere. Everything is imported with 1 star. So on the keyboard, I hold my fingers over 2, 3, and R. If I like the picture and decide it's something I want to work with, you can see here I hit 2. It gave it 2 stars. If I really like it, I can hit 3 stars. Go back to 2 stars, 3 stars. And I'll go through the entire film roll and hit 2, 3, or reject. If it's something out of focus, if I accidentally clicked on something. And that starts me on my workflow of deciding what's worth keeping and working on and what's not. So hit tab again, come out of that view. So now I can sort by rating if I want to, but what I'm going to do is keep it sort by time, and now here, view, This is anything greater than 1 star, greater or equal to 1 star. Now 1 star are things I'm probably not impressed with and I'm not going to work on, so I will change it to 2 stars. And if I zoom out, you can see I've only got 9 images of the original, I think there were 16 that I took. So this has helped me narrow down my workflow. Normally, if it's a bigger shoot, I would go through and decide which of the 2 stars are good enough to warrant a 3-star or more. I'm not that great of a photographer. 3 stars is about as far as it goes. So this is where I will then start. You can see this icon. This means that Darktable has already applied some changes to it. So these 2 photos are 2 photos I've already worked on. So it just helps so you can go through and figure out, if you come back to it a few days later, geez, which shot was it that I was working on, because this one looks like this one looks like this one. You'll have one of these icons letting you know you've worked on it. Another way to get to some of your images, if it's something you've worked on in the last month or so, you can go to collect images, and you can start to filter them through any of these different tags. So I usually keep it with film roll, and then clear this. I would go through, oh, it's set on folder, sorry. Film roll, and then I will start going through my film rolls, and it goes by the last ones that you worked on. So if I wanted to go back to the time on Nantasket Beach, there it is. It's showing nothing because I still have it set up here for 2 stars. I can roll it back to 1 star. This is everything from that film roll that I imported from Nantasket Beach. But for now, I want to show you how to do some basic editing that I do. So we're going to go back into the Broadmoor. Everything's here. Let me go back to my 2-star images. There they are. Down here on the light table view, you've got image information. So this will give you all sorts of things that you may or may not want to know. My camera does not do GPS tagging, but my basic copyright, since I'm an open source software kind of guy, it's Creative Commons. I put my name in. That's in the options somewhere. If you read the owner's manual, you'll figure out how to do all that. All sorts of information here, important stuff. My aperture, my ISO, my focal length, all that sort of fun stuff shows up. Over here is stuff we may get to later on if these videos take off. Otherwise, the last thing we'll get to is export over here. But for now, most of this we won't even look at. So we're going to go ahead and bring in an image into the darkroom view. You can highlight it and click darkroom, or you can just double click it and it brings it into darkroom. Once into darkroom, you've got 2 different sides here. You can see here, this is the history, all the edits I've made to this one, which I'll sometimes bring up, but I'll usually keep hidden. And then also the same image information that you saw in the Lightroom view. But I'll generally keep this panel hidden because my laptop doesn't have a very big screen. Over here are going to be your different types of adjustments to use. Right here is the basic group, which is where I'll generally start, and you can see some pretty simple naming on what all this stuff will do. Next one is the tone group. Again, some of this stuff I use often, some of it I don't use often. Here we are in the color group. This is where you'll go to make adjustments to your color. Corrections group. where you go to do things like denoise, defringe, sharpen, all that sort of stuff. And then finally the creative group, which is where you'll go to add watermarks, split toning, but you can see all this different stuff. So generally I'll start here in the basic group. So what I'm going to do now is, since I'm really not all that impressed with this shot or what I did with it, so here's my entire history. I'll come down to original. This is something that we're all probably used to seeing, a very flat, low contrast. This is right out of the camera. There are places you can go to set up a few basic modules on import. So orientation, I make sure it's facing the right way. Darktable applies a certain amount of sharpening, which I'm perfectly okay with. Unbreak input profile and color, input color profile. Those are things I do specifically for my Nikon camera. Base curve is something that Darktable automatically applies. And then chromatic aberrations is something I've decided as, and demosaic is something Darktable decided. So those are all the sort of defaults. So I'm going to come to the demosaic. You can see everything between 1 and 7 have been applied. I'm going to hit compress history stack. And now my whole history is gone. I'm going to start this one from the beginning. You can see up here you've got a histogram. You have a couple of options. This is generally what I see on the back of my camera, the histogram. You can see the gray is your, I guess, luminosity. Then you've got yellows, reds, greens, blues are all in there. They also give you this, I'm not sure, logarithmic or whatever it might be. Either way, but you just want to obviously look to see this gray area is all of your color. You want to see your black points and your white points, and you'll see if stuff's blown out. I'm going to keep it here for now. Down here are your blinkies or your blowout indicators. You turn it on. Everything in red is a pixel whose information is completely lost in either the red or blue or green channel. So we can fix some of that. If it was blue, it would be, alright, so red means it's been lost to white, blue means it's been lost to dark. So if we come in here and fiddle with exposure some, let me delete this other one so to not confuse anything. Pretty basic exposure control. You can see here you've got the EV. You can just use it as a regular slider. You can see the reds coming and going. So as I increase exposure, more and more pixels are lost to pure white. And if I drop it, some point, alright, we don't lose anything to pure black. So I'll drag the black levels up. Now you see stuff's being lost. It's total black. Double click anywhere on the line or on the numbers, resets it to 0. So the first thing I want to do is, even with the indicators turned off, I think it's too bright. So normally I would just grab this exposure slider and start to bring it down. But I think my highlights are too bright, although I think my shadows are pretty good. So I don't want to just drag this down, because it starts to get too dark. So a couple of options. Basic is shadow and highlights. This is something you might see in Lightroom. When you turn it on, the default boosts the shadow by 50 points and decreases highlights by 50 points. Personally, I have found that it's a one-size-fits-all tool, which means one size doesn't really fit all very well. In this case, it does pretty good. You can see I've still got some of the red, not as much as before. But in general, I just lost a whole bunch of contrast, which I don't like. So I'll use it sometimes, but for now, I'm not going to use it. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. I'm going to come down here to exposure. And one of the first things I do all the time is I turn on the parametric mask. Parametric simply means there's a number of metrics, many metrics, parametric, that you can create masks based on. So here are the different categories, I guess, the different metrics you can use to decide what you want to make your mask on. Right now, it's selected the gray value. Basically, if it turns the picture into monochrome, you can decide based on the pixel's gray value what you want to do, what exposure is going to work on. So there's the gray value, the red values, the green values, the blue values. You can look at just hue, saturation, and my favorite, luminosity. In the exposure module, luminosity, if you look at the input line down here, luminosity works on a scale of 0 being black and 100 being white, and all of the different gray points in between. For this, I prefer to work in gray, because you can see from gray we have 0 to 255. Just gives us a little more fine control over it. So to me it's still a luminosity mask. I suppose technically it's not, but I use it like a luminosity mask. We're going to turn the mask on. Display mask is this white box with a white gray circle cut out of it. We turn it on, and everything is yellow. So I'm about to make some exposure adjustments with this module, and everything that is yellow is what exposure is going to act upon. So right now it is acting upon every single pixel in the image. So I can come down here to the input. Don't bother thinking about the output. I honestly don't know what it does, so just remove it from your brain. You don't need to use it, and if you do get to the point where you're good enough to use it, please make a video and share it with me. So the first thing I want to do is reduce the highlights. All of this bright stuff is just a little too bright for me, and it draws my eye right away, so it's the first thing I want to work on. So I'm going to turn the mask back on, and down at this end, this is starting, 0 point is the black point, and as you start to slide it up, you will see the darkest pixels are no longer yellow. So that means the exposure adjustments I make are going to have no effect on those. So right now, everything that's yellow will get 100% of the adjustments I make, and everything that's not yellow gets 0%. A lot of cases that makes for some funky looks. So what I'm going to do is drag this up all the way to the right. So now nothing's being affected by the adjustments I'm going to make. And I'm going to drag the bottom triangle down. You can start to see yellow show up. And as I'm including more pixels, more and more yellow will start to show up. So basically what I've done is create a gradient. I stopped randomly here, but any pixels with a value between 0 and 28 will not be affected. Any pixels with a value from 29 to 255 will be affected, but as a gradient. So by the time it gets to the pixels with a 255 value, they're getting 100% of the adjustments I'll make, and the pixels at 29 will get practically 0%. So now you can see instead of one big block of yellow, we've got shades of yellow. So this is basically going to feather our selection for us. Personally, I think this is not going to have a big enough effect. So now what I'm going to do is grab that top triangle, and I'm going to start to pull it down. So that means everything from 199 to 255 is going to get 100% of the adjustment. So that's this area here. So those really bright ones I want to get most of the adjustment to. So I'm going to keep pulling this down. And now it's starting to look like the stuff I want to reduce exposure is going to get what I want. This is all from experience. Use this long enough and you'll figure it out. But if I zoom in, if I click down on my mouse wheel, that's 100%, that's 200%, I can see some pretty finite lines here. And that's not going to look great. So I'm going to start here with mask blur, and I'm going to blur it just randomly. I clicked and it's 6.9 pixels. You can mouse wheel over it and it'll make adjustments as you want by 1/10 of a pixel in this case. So we've just blurred it a little bit. It shouldn't look too different from here, right? If we did no black mask blur, you can see that there's edges. We do a little bit of a mask blur, it softens it a bit. So now I can turn off the mask. I'm presented with the whole image. I have a pretty good idea of what's going to be affected by the adjustments I make. So I'm going to grab the slider and I'm just going to start to pull it down. You can see changes up here. You can start to see some changes here. I've dropped it down 1 EV or excuse me, 1/2 of an EV or 1/2 of a stop. I'm going to drag it all the way down to about 1. -1. And I've got a lot of the color back. To check what you've done, this button here turns the module on and off. So I can turn it off and see before, after, before, after. I like I've brought in a lot more color, but it doesn't look quite right. Something's not exactly right. So I might come over here and adjust the mask, blur it out a little bit. Starting to look a little more natural. You can see now the mask with a blur of 45.6 pixels. It's now working in very general areas and not really on anything specific. So again, I'd ask you not to judge me. I'm just doing this for demonstration. That looks a lot better than this. I've got color. Turn it off again. In the wood here, where I've just got white, I've brought color and details back. So right away, I feel like I'm starting to get something that I like. So that's parametric mask for exposure. One other thing you can do here, if I bring this back to 0, or if I double click, I bring it back to 0. I can right click here and just type in -1. It'll bring me right to -1. I've also made some presets for +1, -1, -2. We can go over that later if you guys want some help with that. So there I have fixed my highlights in a way that I think is better than the simple shadow and highlights module. But what about the shadows? In this case, I actually think my shadows look pretty good. I did a nice job exposing them. But I want to move my black point up. I think it's still a little too bright. I don't need to increase my shadows. So this icon here allows me to create a new instance. I'm going to create a new instance, and it's now called Exposure 1. I would love to be able to rename these things, but right now that's not an option. So I just have to keep in mind what it is that I'm doing. So for this one, I just need to increase the blacks a little bit. So what I'm going to do is turn the indicators back on. You can see I still have a little bit of red indicating I'm out of gamut, but that's not stuff I'm too worried about. So now I'm going to hover over my blacks, and I'm just going to scroll up on the scroll wheel until, oh, there we go, until I see some black, some pixels dropping to black. And just to my taste, I'm going to go a little bit more, and I'll turn it off and see what I think. I think that's, to me, that's added a little contrast, a little bit of depth, and I like what's going on here. So again, you can hover over the power button, turn it off, turn it on. You'll also see that when you add blacks, it changes the color in the histogram. That's a whole bunch of color theory, far outside of the scope of this video and my knowledge. So I'm just going to leave it like that. I don't feel the need to make a parametric mask to make adjustments to any of my shadows in this case. So for now, that's pretty much the exposure changes I'm going to make. I don't really like this composition at all as it is. I was really just desperately looking for something to photograph. So I might come in here into the crop and rotate. The boardwalk itself wasn't very level, and I'm pretty sure I was, but the level of it is off. It's just off by a little bit. So here in crop and rotate, I can grab this and I can make adjustments to the angle, and I could get crazy with it. You can see over here how many degrees it's changing by. A lot of times you don't need to change it by much. Another thing that I like to do, I'll click on the mouse wheel to zoom in, and if I think for some reason this line's supposed to be straight but it's not, I'll start on one side of the screen, hold down the right click, drag it across, and tell it, I think this line, you can see this line here, I think this line is what is supposed to be horizontal. I'll let go, and it'll adjust the whole picture, making that line horizontal. I really don't like what I just did, but it'll make that line completely horizontal, made an adjustment by negative 1.57 degrees, and it auto cropped. All that, that's a great move. Love that. I don't like that. I'm going to send it back to normal and probably leave the level the way it is. If I want to make crops, I can grab the edges and make crops. You can see it tells you how many pixels. You can grab the whole cropped area and move it around. So you've got edges. You've also got corners you can grab and make adjustments. And then over here in aspect, I have it at original image. You can absolutely go freehand, and then you've got all these different options to use if you want. I'm not sure if you can quite see it, but we've got the rule of thirds turned on right here. You can change it to a full grid where the rule of thirds are highlighted a little bit. Oops. You can get crazy and go with harmonious triangles, which you really can't see on this. The golden mean. There's all sorts of fun stuff in here you can play with. I generally leave it on the rule of thirds. No good reason at all. So let's say this is my crop. Let's say I was pretty wide. I want to bring the edges in so that the boardwalk starts at the corners. I'll pull that in. You can either click, double click, and that'll do the cut. Or once you've got the crop that you want, you can just click on the name of the module and it'll make the crop for you. So that's my basic exposure adjustments. A couple other masks that I like to do. Mid-tone contrast. I don't use this contrast, brightness, and saturation module very much, but I've started using just the contrast slider. So what I'll do again is go to a parametric mask. I'm going to stay on luminosity this time. This time luminosity's at the front. And I'm going to make what I'm going to call my midtones selection. So I'm going to turn on my mask, and now I'm going to start with 100, which is pure white. I'm going to grab the bottom triangle. Okay, bottom triangle, if I can grab it. I'm going to start to slide it down until you can see some of the highlights. These are now pixels with a rating of 91 to 100, and they're not going to be operated on this. You know what? I'm just going to bring it down to 90. Oops. You know what? I'm just going to leave it at 0, just to make the math easy. So for midtones, I'm going to grab the top. Now, if you remember, I'm creating a gradient now. I'm going to bring this all the way down to 50, which is the middle. So, any pixel with a luminosity from 50, at 50 we'll get 100% of the contrast adjustment I'm about to make. And anything at 100 will get 0%. So you can already start to see some of the brightest stuff is not going to be adjusted. I'm going to do the same starting at the left side, which is the darks. Oops, send that back. I'm just going to grab the top one. I'm going to drag that up to 50. And now you can see 0 pure black is going to get no adjustment. Pure white is going to get no adjustment. And it's just going to, you can see it's already sort of made a gradient to 50, and I call this the midtones. This is contrast. I don't know if I need to blur this mask, but I'm going to fiddle with it and see what I get. So I turn off the mask, I'm going to grab my contrast slider, and I'm going to increase contrast in the mids. Let's make a big adjustment and see what we get. A little too much. I'm also keeping an eye on my histogram up here. If you want, you can turn on your indicators and see what you're going to get, but I don't like to use the indicators because I'm trying to see the darks and the brights, which I don't want covered up. So just for fun, we're going to move it up to, let's say, 24. Let's see how I did. Before, after, before, after. It did something for me over here. It brought some of my highlights back out up here, or it blew out some of my highlights so I could go back into my my exposure and bring that down a little bit more if I wanted to, but that sort of defeats the purpose of contrast anyhow. So that's how I make a midtones contrast selection, and you can really start to play with it and make some adjustments. I like a little bit. That looks pretty good to me. I honestly don't even know what I'm looking for in this demo. I'm just fiddling around. Again, don't judge me on the photograph or the final edit. So that's the basic group. That's where I work the most. Occasionally I'll have to go into white balance. Right now, it's applying the white balance that the camera set. I can go in and we've got a bunch of presets. None of this should be unusual. I can go camera neutral, not bad. I like spot. Spot is something, you can see this line that it's drawn. Uses this box to decide, take the average of the gray tones. And actually the color's pretty good on this one, but just to give you an idea, I remember there's a little spot over here that's pretty much pure black. So you can just click and drag and make a tiny little selection. And that tiny little selection, I just told Darktable that that was pure black, and it made a color adjustment based on that. Maybe the boardwalk is middle gray. So let me select that and see what we get. That's a little bit better. You can make adjustments to tint, temperature, and different, if I thought it was too blue, I could drag the blues down. And you can see here it makes adjustments to everything else as you drag the blues down. I actually don't think that there were too many blues in here, but I thought, let me show them how to do that anyhow. Fine tune. If you've got a camera, newer camera than mine, Darktable finds a way to somehow fine tune your white balance. I don't know what's involved in that. If you use a camera and that option is highlighted, dive into it, figure it out. But for now, I'm just going to leave it on what the camera decided. That looks close enough for this demonstration. The next things in the tone group, I don't do a lot of work on most of my stuff in the tone group. Here's a basic tone curve for those of you who do use it. It works on the luminosity channel, the A channel, and the B channel from Lab Color. The Lab Color profile, I guess. I'm not great with that. You can make any of the adjustments you want. You can save them as presets. I generally use luminosity masks and exposure to adjust my tones. I don't know if a lot of people do that, but that's how I do it. You've also got the zone system. If you're familiar with a certain landscape photographer who invented this, you can fiddle around with this and learn how to use it. You can even use it in the color photos if you want. Local contrast, this is the darktable equivalent of Lightroom's what's the word I'm looking for? Hold on. I gotta look here to see what it is. Clarity, that's what it is. So in local contrast is basically clarity. It appears to sharpen. So you turn it on to these presets and you should hopefully see already just a little bit of local contrast or some clarity. You can get crazy with it and drag the detail slider all the way up and it looks awful. Double click on it and it sets it back to this 0.200, which is the default. Contrast, I don't think there's enough in here to really make a difference. In coarseness, sort of how big of a thing the adjustments are going to be made to. That said, I used to use local contrast a lot for sharpening. I have not anymore. I'll get to that in a little bit. Color, there's a lot here. Input color profile and unbreak. Again, these are things I just use for Nikon. But some of the things that you'll find in Lightroom that you might want to use here. So color zones is one of my favorite. There's lightness, saturation, and hue. So this would be your HSL section in Lightroom. So let's say I think these greens are a little too blue. So I will go to hue. I'll grab the eyedropper and I will pick some green. This black line shows up. On the hue, it shows that this is right here in the greens. You can grab these guys down here and slide to help you make a more narrowed down selection. Or this circle, you can scroll wheel down to make it bigger, scroll wheel up to make it smaller. Let's say I want to get crazy, I want it to be a little fall-like. So I'm going to drag this one, come on. Alright, I'll drag this one to the line. I'm going to use this one to kind of limit. Alright, what I'll do is I'll just scroll down. Now let's say I wanted to make it fall-like. I'm going to take the greens in this, and I'm going to bring it down to yellow. And instantly you can see the color adjustments it makes. You can get real crazy, bring it down to reds, and it just gets crazy. So HSL sliders, this is the equivalent here. If I think the greens, you can see this black line stayed when I switched to the saturation tab. The selection's still over here. If I think the greens are a little too saturated, I can drag the line down, or I can drag the line up if I don't think they're saturated enough. And then lightness, if I think the greens are too bright or too dark, again, I can darken them or lighten them. This is a great tool that you can use. to fix color. If you do some long exposure stuff with a neutral density filter, you can come in here and make some easy color adjustments where the white balance might not help. So I'll use stuff in here a lot. Now let's say I wanted to make this, but it's a little too much. I can grab the mix and just start to make adjustments to it. So I've made a gross adjustment here, and then I can grab the mix slider and sort of give it a little more fine control. But again, I don't think this image really needs it. If you want to go monochrome, this would be the color of the filter you put in front of your lens if you were a film shooter. So if you put a blue filter on, this is how it would look in your film. If you put a green filter on, so it filters out the green light, that would mean anything that's green is going to be a lighter or closer to white color. If you want to filter out the sky to make your sky look darker or lighter in black and white, you can do all that here. I'm not a black and white shooter. I don't do well with it. Color contrast I don't like. So vibrance is pretty self-explanatory. This will turn up the saturation, I believe, on all of the pixels. I don't use it, don't need it on this one. And Velvia, I don't know exactly what it does, but it warms everything up the more you turn it up. I don't use that very much, but I used to. There's a lot you can do in here. I'm going to skip it all though. And I'm going to move on to corrections. So, I was out shooting with my Nikon D7000 and my Tokina 11-16 Pro. I'm going to turn it on. And, no, it's not. Alright, hold on, let me select manually. So the Nikon is what I was using. Tokina 11-16. Alright, I was at 11 millimeters, which I've got there. I was at f4. I don't remember being there. So this is taking it right out of the EXIF data. I was focused at 0.71 meters for this. There's some pretty significant wide angle adjustments. Either way, it doesn't so much matter on this. I don't really have vertical lines that it would be fixing, but you can also come down and do corrections all, and you can make it, you can ask it to fix your chromatic aberrations and all that sort of stuff. If the camera is profiled and it has all that stuff, so you might want to use that if you're doing architecture. Denoising, this I love. Darktable, the darktable developers have profiled cameras and lenses in a variety of different combinations. I'm lucky that I shoot with the Nikon D7000, which is one of the most popular cameras on the planet, and most of the lenses I use are very popular. So it has found a match for ISO 250 for my camera, Nikon D7000. You can see they've got it there. There's a couple of different modes. There's non-local means, which is light. It's the, hold on here. It's not the color noise. It's the luminosity noise. But I will first start on wavelets, which will take care of any color noise. So I zoom in, and there's probably not much. Let me turn it off. Yeah, there's not much in this, but just to give you an idea, when you turn it on, you're going to see the typical blurring. I've got a preset here for wavelets 1, which does a pretty good job of removing the noise, and it blends on the HSV color category, I guess. If it's too much, I can adjust the strength down or up. And then I can create a second instance of the profiled denoise. And for local means, which is the light noise, turn it on. And you see we lost a lot of detail there. Honestly, with both of these turned on, I lost the most detail in the non-local means. So what I could do is create a luminosity mask. And since I don't want to lose detail in the highlights, I can start to pull down what's going to be denoised out of my brightest spots. You'll notice it takes a lot longer to work now. Denoising, of course, as hopefully we all know, denoising is pretty CPU intensive, so it is the last thing you want to do. If you feel the need to go ahead and do it early on because you've got a high ISO image, and you want to just get the noise out of the way so you can work with it, you can go ahead and do your denoising. So here now you can see I'm going to be working on it's just going to be denoising some of the darkest areas, which is great. But once you apply denoising, if you've got other changes you want to make, you just want to go ahead and turn the denoising modules off, and your computer will be much snappier. So there's a couple of different denoising methods they have in here. There's no fringing, but to defringe, and chromatic aberrations I think I've turned on by default. But here's the equalizer module, which is one of the most amazing modules I think I've ever seen. It's got 3 tabs: Luma, Chroma, and Edges. I mostly use Luma, and what you can see here, you've got these different bands. So basically what Darktable has done is create wavelet decompose, I think. I'm not sure if wavelet is the right word, but it takes the picture apart by frequency. So I'm not sure if these are your higher frequencies or your lower frequencies, but you can see over here it says fine and coarse. Up here it says contrasty, and at the bottom it says smooth. So basically, if you start at the fine end, you're going to work on the finer sections of your image. So what I like to do is slide up a little bit of the finest, and somewhere in the middle here of the finest to the not quite finest, and I'll slide those up towards contrasty, and I will get some sharpening. You can really overdo it here, just to give you an idea. You can really see some of the fine details here in the wood, but that's way too much. So double click on the line, returns it to normal. I'm just going to push this up just a little bit, and I get a little bit of sharpening. Maybe I'll do a little bit more here. Let's see if I bring all of it up, even onto the bigger. I think that's a little too much for me, but I can easily just do the off and on. If I don't like it, turn it on. This button here resets everything, brings it back to the default, and I'm just going to bump up this stuff just a little bit, just pick up some of those details. So that's one way I do sharpening. There's also noise down here. It's not so much noise reduction as it is smoothing. So as you can see, I've zoomed in, and now we've got a few more light and dark bands. So Darktable has found some more sizes to work on. And I can come down here to the smallest sizes, and I can drag this up towards smooth. When you're down here on there's noisy, and if you can see up at the top it says smooth. The fine and the coarse stay the same. But you can see I just smoothed out a lot of details. That's a whole lot of it, and in this case it's just details. It's not a lot of noise. I don't actually need that. So double click and bring it back, and now you can see all the details that come back in here. So that's good to use if you need a little more denoising, or if you just need a little bit of denoising. It gives you fine control. On chroma, I hardly ever use it, and on edges, I hardly ever use it. I really don't know much about what those do. So, again, it's mostly here with local. It does local adjustments. This is basically local contrast, like we talked about earlier, but a little bit more fine control. So that is pretty much my workflow. This was a pretty lame picture, and I'm sorry I didn't have much to do, but hopefully it gave you an idea of what you can do with some of the masks. Split toning is starting to become popular. Sorry, we'll go into the creative group here. Oh, the effects group. You can apply a watermark if you've got one. I don't. You can apply a vignette if you want to. I don't. High pass and low pass filters I can go into at some point if you guys are interested. Just let me know. And graduated density is almost redundant, because most of the time you're going to use it to make a graduated selection in exposure. But you can see here in exposure, you can do, in exposure, you can do a parametric mask, which we did before on luminosity. You can do a drawn mask. So if you want to select a circle, an oval, a freehand select, or a brush, you can click brush, scroll down makes it bigger, scroll up makes it smaller. If you scroll and hold shift, it makes the center larger, so less feathering. Or if you hold control, it will actually affect the opacity of it. So let's say I want to, where we're set to decrease exposure by, I want to decrease exposure over here. I can just draw that on. And you can see it's dark in this area over here. We can turn on the mask so you can see exactly what it was working on. You can see it feathered itself out quite nicely. And now if you hold control and scroll, you can see the yellow gets a little bit paler. So that is the opacity of the mask. Right click to remove the drawn mask. I'm going to go back to my parametric mask. It remembers everything that was just there, which is nice. Let's say you want to get crazy. Sorry, I'm jumping all over. So let's say you want to use this parametric mask, but you don't want it to affect the greens. You can combine this mask with hue. So I'm going to grab this dropper. Let me turn off the mask. I'm going to grab this dropper. I'm going to select some of the greens. Now you can see the line right here is what color green is in this square. So I'll turn my mask back on, and if I just want it to affect the greens, I'll make my sliders, bring my sliders down, and you can watch all of the reds, everything from here to here just came out of the mask. That's just about everything, but I'll bring this side down too as well, and I just want to use it on the greens. What I do want to do is make sure that I make a gradient with it. So I'm going to keep some of the yellows and some of the lighter greens. So I can combine my grayscale or my luminosity mask with a hue mask at the same time to take total control over what this mask is going to affect. And since you have the option to create an infinite number of instances, you can really fine-tune the masks that you're going to use here. You can then take it even further and combine your parametric mask that you just created with a drawn mask. Grab your brush, and now let's say you just want to apply it to these really bright pixels up here, but you think the pixels over here look fine. So now you can just take this brush and paint on that parametric mask. So we turn the mask on. These are the things that it affected. I could grab another brush and I could paint down here, and since none of those things are selected for luminosity excuse me, or for hue, it's not going to do anything. So right click to get rid of the drawn. And now, as you can see, none of the greens, the overblown greens down here, are being affected by it. This is an incredibly powerful way to make masks. You're painting on a luminosity mask combined with a hue mask, and it gives you the ability to target just about anything you can think of, and to be honest, it'll help you target a million things you can't think of. It is brilliant and powerful, and if you're used to making luminosity selections in Photoshop, you're going to find this is vastly superior, so much easier. So I think that's about all I want to get into. This is my workflow on a pretty basic, boring shot. If you guys have any questions, absolutely hit me up in the comments or hit me up in the TTF Slack, and I'll make more videos or try to talk you through it. Oh, we were going to talk about exporting real quickly. Hit the L key to bring you back to the Lightroom view. And this is the export module down here. Target storage for me is going to be a file on a disk. You do have a couple of different options here, which we can get into. But for now, I'm just going to export it to a file. This box here helps me decide where I'm going to send it. So I've got Audubon, Broadmoor. I'm going to create a new folder called Edits. And I will select as output destination. If this was going up on the web, I don't need it in a TIFF. I would just go with a JPEG. 95, you can bring the quality of it to wherever you want. This will make the file a whole lot smaller to save you space. Let's pick 90. I do not need to have it downsized at all for this example. Style, you can have it automatically add some of the styles that we can talk about later, but one of them is a watermark style. If you just created a watermark, you can have it apply it on export. I don't need to do that right now. So I know it's going to a file on a disk. I know what file it is. I just created it. I'm not resizing anything. So I'm just going to hit export. It's going to export one image. And it's done. So that's it for now. If you've got any other questions on Darktable or my workflow, again, feel free to comment in the leave your question in the comment section below, or hit me up in the TFTTF Slack if you're there, because this is where I'm posting the link to it. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this has helped you a bit. If it's only confused you more, let me know, and I will try to make a more concise video on whatever you have questions on. Thank you for watching. Have yourself a great day.